Thank you for sticking with us. We are heading into our fourth match of the day here for Asia Pacific. Only one more after this to find out who our second player going through to the semi-finals will be before we send you over to Raven and Sottle to take you through the European action. And we're just about ready to jump in, I believe. Had to give the players a chance to make sure everything's working, ready to go to bring you all the action. And as you were saying, Gia, it's looking like fairly similar stuff for the most part. Surrender and Flurry were two of the players to go for Paladin, obviously somewhat against the grain compared to most of the field. And it seems like so far, based on the numbers, that has been hurting their strategies, even though they both made it through to the top 8.
Yeah, I think overall, when we include the Paladin games from the other players, this is the archetype that's been performing pretty poorly. And that's, I'm pretty sad about that because even though the deck is very linear and honestly easy to play, I love it. It is just, it reminds me so much of vanilla Hearthstone. Everything is more powerful, but the skill level needed to play it, I would say, is fairly similar.
Oh, yes. Already, though, for Surrender, we're going to get to see how he approaches this matchup, because we saw from Glory earlier on today against the Druid specifically, very, very aggressive use of his powerful minions. Sorcerer's Apprentice just being played out right at the start. And for Surrender, with already a pretty powerful hand shaping together with the classic combo of Apprentice and Mana Cyclone, I wonder how greedy we're going to be seeing him play here in terms of holding back his threats.
I'd like to see him be very greedy with this, honestly. That's a perfect draw, by the way, and that makes the game plan a lot easier. But the fact that the warrior is running Sword and Shield Slam to deal with that, and far more removal to deal with larger boards, I think that Surrender needs to be going for more value. Needs to make sure he absolutely milks the most spells that he can out of this Mana Cyclone, and by extent, make the Mana Giant as cheap as possible.
And therefore, in order to get the most spells possible here, you need something to react to, really. You need a just any minion, basically, on your opponent's side of the board. So you can go Devolving Missiles, Ray of Frost, get these spells out of your hand, like you said, to go for maximum generation. So I think waiting a turn here is very, very smart, just to give himself the maximum time possible. The real question here is whether he wants to go for maximum generation with Arcane Missiles to play with the Apprentice next turn, or maximum tempo. Mirror Entity is fairly powerful here. I think it's fair to say there's not many tiny minions in the Warrior deck.
Yeah, that's right. I'm definitely looking at Mirror Entity just to fill out the rest of his mana. But it looks like Surrender is valuing a bit more the generation. And I guess the Arcane Missiles, unlike Ray of Frost and Devolving Missiles, doesn't require anything on Flurry's side to be played. It's getting to that awkward point, though, where if you're saving up for the big combo, you might not necessarily have anything to do. But Surrender has hit the cram session. Things can start going a bit wild.
This is the juice. This is what you want to be hitting here as the Tempo Mage. You just throwing out spells just because you can. I absolutely agree with going for Devolving Missiles, even though he had the clear anyway with the Ray of Frost.
Yeah, and he also picks up an additional Solarian. So aside from the one in the deck, that just means he can get 2 primes in totals. Devolving Missiles on the Kargath denies the prime from Flurry's deck. This is a pretty perfect outcome for Surrender. He was just doing the math to make sure that he wouldn't end up overdrawing after all these spells are played, but I think it's pretty far from a full hand.
Yeah, might actually be one off from a full hand with 6 spells played here. But yeah, I mean, like you said, working it out, and it works out pretty perfectly here. So many cards, he can't even hold them all properly, it would seem.
Yeah, okay, I couldn't even tell if it was far or not because something about that formatting was weird.
It's a pretty good selection, though, in all honesty. Conjurer's Calling is huge whenever that is able to be generated, especially when you don't run it naturally in your deck. And just another cram session, I'd take that.
Yeah, absolutely. The Conj with the Mana Giant already is going to be very, very big. It can't be played together quite yet next turn, but Surrender can set up for it on the follow-up.
Oh,
this is tough. I don't think he quite has the hand space to go for everything this turn.
Yeah. He, at what, 9 cards, can just go Solarian, Cram Session, agree completely. Let's fill up that hand again.
And he can Spellbender to just cheapen the Mana Giants further. Now he now has both of them in hand.
Yeah. I mean, we're looking at very possibly just Giant Conjurer's Calling. Next turn's pretty huge.
And for Flurry, we've hardly talked about his turns because He's been going about them very, very quickly. Right now, he's just getting that Wrench Caliber online so he can on the Blastmaster Boom as soon as possible.
Yeah, Coin Burst to play around the counterspell. I guess makes sense. He can't go now Coin Deathwing, which is a little bit scary. So he has one turn of weakness, or vulnerability, I should say, that he's potentially looking at. But given that he can just play Blastmaster Boom next turn, as you said anyway, it's probably just fine. I like it.
And given that Surrender saw that usage of coin, I think this is going to be at least one Mana Giant committed this turn. I also want to see the Conjurer's Calling.
Yeah.
And he can close out the turn with a 1-6. Oh, would he be overdrawing then? No, it goes back to 9.
Well, that's not what you want. I'll definitely tell you that at least.
What do you mean? He's playing around Bladestorm.
True. Okay. Yeah, I was talking about Gruul. I don't know what you're talking about.
Natalie is lackluster here, but the fact that there's a 7/7 that grows and a 6/6, I think, is more than enough threats that will warrant Flurry to get use at least a Brawl or something else.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know if Surrender was considering the second Mana Giant there. I think it would be a pretty clear overextension on this board, given that he has the second Conjurer's Calling, which needs a strong target in order to go with.
Completely agree there. Coerce, the new dual-class Rogue Warrior card, gives Flurry an option to remove a minion if it's comboed out, or a damaged minion if it's not comboed out. And he can go Armor Up, Shield Slam, and the Coerce, and then just, I guess, swing into the Natalie, no matter how painful it is.
There is, of course, the Spellbender, though, which he's starting to work through in his mind. It very possibly is.
Right. So he is just starting off with the Shield Slam there. Looks like we are just going to see the 6/6 stay in play here.
This is, yeah, this is great news for Surrender. It's got to be said. When you have a Fireball already in hand, waiting to go, 6 more damage available to come down on the following turn. This is the situation I was talking about. You get some damage in, you stick those 1 or 2 minions on the board, and then every burn spell you generate gets you that little bit closer to just closing out the game.
Opening hand, I have to say, it was close to ideal, and you can really see that impact of that cram session for 3 draws that he had. It just made everything come together so much more smoothly. This is Mage at its finest, and we'll just have to see if Surrender is able to close it out. In most circumstances, I would still want to just follow up with Mana Giant's second Conj, but the fact that there are 2 small minions that could make Brawl a bit more threatening maybe leaves room for a different line.
So what are you thinking instead? Going for... I mean, an Apprentice Cyclone turn doesn't look all too impressive to me, because there's not that many spells that work along with it. Maybe just like Astromancer and Arcane Intellect to keep cycling through your deck whilst being happy with the board presence you have.
Thinking about that too, but on my third glance, what if it's something like Conj this and then ping away your own lab student? Is that playing around Brawl too hard?
I see your point, yeah. I mean, I think the real thing here that Surrender is very correctly realizing is that Brawl isn't even really the thing he needs to be playing around the most. It's actually Deathwing here, which is why I really like his massive overextension onto the board, because something is going to stick here, even with Deathwing hitting the perfect targets, and then he's just won the game.
That's a really, really good point there. That was just a masterclass on how to play Mage, and I guess how to draw the right combination, but I think you kind of pointed it out very, very succinctly before the match even started. If there are consistent threats, then the spells just go over the top and close it out. You don't even give the warrior time to breathe. And bear in mind, the Conjurer's Calling was not in the original list, but it was very much the MVP of this game.
It really, really was. I do think that Surrender's list here is close to the right version of the deck, but is maybe just that little bit light on threats, because he's not playing Shenvala or the copy of Conjurer's Calling, which a lot of players have gone for. Maybe it's just an anti-aggro list. He was expecting a lot more aggro in the metagame than we have seen so far in top 8, but it's clearly working out for him decently well. Taking the win there and getting through to the top 8 at all is impressive in its own right. But yeah, like you said, it was, I think the first few turns were fairly self-explanatory in terms of how you play them. Going for the arcane missiles early on, I think, was pretty smart. It was really just the last turn that I think really showed great understanding of what he was playing against. Going as wide as possible looked like an overextension, but it just played so beautifully against the expected play from Flurry, and does mean that Surrender, in a fashion we're much more accustomed from him, has taken a win this series.
And it's really huge because I was talking about how that Mage could possibly be his problem deck, given that there was a warrior on the other side. But now that it's taken what we think is probably a slight unfavorable, that really opens up the possibility for Surrender to even sweep this warrior. He has Druid, which I think is a pretty good matchup into that, and this Libram Paladin, which I think when given time can just squeeze out so much value that it might be too much for warrior to overcome.
Oh, it's just great. I just remembered that we're talking about entirely new archetypes here, pretty much across the board, and it made me happy to think how far we've come. I cannot wait to jump into the rest of the series, but before we do, we're going to go to a short break before we find out who will sadly be eliminated from week 1 of Hearthstone Grandmasters, having to fight out in the following weeks to try and end up in Division A. Surrender vs. Flurry will continue after this. Welcome back to Hearthstone Grandmasters here in Asia Pacific. It's our fourth match of the day, Surrender and Flurry, one of the best performing players last season in Surrender, up against, sadly, one of the worst performing players who didn't end up getting relegated in Flurry last season. But I think even having said that, despite their recent results for Flurry in particular, still two of the best players that Asia Pacific and South Korea in particular have to offer to the Hearthstone scene. And even with Surrender playing a lights-out game of Tempo Mage there, Flurry still in with a decent chance of turning things around, I believe. But as you were saying at the start, you feel like the Warrior deck, I guess, against the Paladin and also to a lesser extent against the Druid could struggle.
Yeah, I haven't played a whole lot of that matchup or any matchup, honestly, because the meta is so new. But just looking at the principle of the Paladin being able to generate near unlimited Librams of Wisdom, generate even more Paladin cards from the Lightforged Crusader, feels like it's going to be difficult for Warrior to be able to outlast that, especially since damage dealt by bombs can be offset by healing from Libram of Hope.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of healing options that you're looking at.
Is going to be this particular matchup, though. I will say that if Flurry wants to get any good game plan going, it does involve an early Corsair cache.
Kind of interesting there to see Surrender go for the first day at school on one. It makes sense to an extent because you want to give yourself the most options possible going with your turn one play. But with Goody Two Shields in hand, there is of course the option to try and activate the spell burst in that fashion.
Yeah, I find with Goody Two Shields, a lot of the time, your opponent has to be in a very good spot to actually, very bad spot to actually let you get the activation on it, because it starts with shield. So to get the spell burst on it, you need to take a value trade. I think a lot of the time, Goody Two Shields, you just look at it as a 3-mana 4/2 with taunt even, because your opponent needs to remove it. And for that purpose, it's very, very good.
One thing that is not very, very good, however, is this turn for Flurry, where we're looking at Shield Slam is honestly, I think, a valid play on that turn because it's not looking like he's going to have any armor for quite a long time to come.
Yeah, it's already looking like a very annoying board state for Flurry to deal with. I think, given that Surrender has chosen to go wide, I absolutely like this. Going to the face and just letting Surrender walk into the brawl.
I mean, it's not the line I was looking at first, but obviously, like you said, it makes sense. It is, however, a very, very obvious play. Surrender knows exactly what is up with this line with the weapon going face. So I have to imagine it's going to be a reserved play on this turn.
Even if it's obvious, Surrender doesn't have a good way to play around it, is the thing. The expected plays on turn 4, if it's not going to be Lightforged Zealot, it's going to be a coin 5 drop. And 5 drop, that's another thing that goes into Brawl. If it's the Blessing of Authority, then you're likely to remove that big minion anyway. So I think it's totally fine that Flurry telegraphed the Brawl and gets the outcome that he needed.
What now?
In the sense that most of the minions were cleared, but of course the outcome of specifically Shotbot surviving is a little bit annoying for Flurry, but between that and Goody Two Shields, I think that's totally fine.
Yeah, you'd definitely take that. And it's just overall a clean curve for Surrender here. If he wants to go for Aldor Truthseeker into Blessing of Wisdom, or sorry, Blessing of Hope, that's the obvious play. Liberum of Hope, sorry. Wrong on both counts there.
Don't worry.
But of course, there's the alternate lines of just like getting McGurgle in the deck, trying to milk that hero power for all it's worth.
I definitely like the look of staying on curve here. The Truth Seeker into Libram of Hope just gives Flurry the most to deal with. And we're already looking at Flurry down to half of his health here. Surrender, while he can go for a value-oriented game plan, it doesn't mean that he needs to completely forego just curving out and playing threats every single turn, which is also traditionally been something that Warrior struggles to deal with.
Yeah, and even though it's a very, very different deck, I like what you bring up about being what Warrior struggles, because it's kind of similar to how the Mage was approaching it, where you just, as quickly as possible, you're putting consistent, decent-sized threats on the board turn after turn. And even though there is enough removal in the Warrior's deck to deal with all of it, there's not enough in hand. It's not going to draw its entire deck before the game is out. So it's very, very possible that even just on one turn of weakness, you can get the necessary damage you need.
And Flurry did have a turn of weakness. His best play is just to play Kronks very slow on tempo, and Surrender now can deal another 7 damage to face. He didn't quite hit a big buff spell. I guess this is one of the downsides of not running Blessing of Kings in the deck, but I think he's perfectly happy to either just play another Devout Pupil or even the Libram of Hope.
He needs to think, what happens if the board is cleared? Like, what is my response? And obviously Libram of Hope would be, assuming you target it on a minion, would reduce the cost of one of the Devout Pupils. So like, just Devout Pupil Murga is a decent response on the following turn.
Definitely like that. Healing on his own face is absolutely irrelevant here, and the fact that Surrender has made 2 chumps between his bigger taunted minions means that Flurry's Blade Storm outs are also very limited. I don't know, Flurry's just stuck.
Yeah,
he has the Lord Barov.
Yeah, so he needs a to go cutting class into the Skipper plus Barov to really have much of a chance.
I'm looking at Barov and Shield Slam your own Barov.
Okay. True.
He gives up his Kronks in the process, given that it trades into the Divine Shield, but he just needs to clear the board.
Gonna be honest,
otherwise.
Did not see that line. I like it though.
It's a clear. But Surrender maintains initiative. Being able to put down 2 minions instead of 1 is a huge difference here, so really good spot to be able to put that Hope, Libram of Hope on a minion.
I mean, you just play the Zealot now, right? Getting down the weapon to start swinging base every turn looks pretty huge.
I guess if it weren't Warrior that could armor out of the range here, I would agree with you. But when you play 2 minions with lower health, I think it's a lot easier to deal with for a skipper turn, for example.
Fair enough.
What now?
So Deathwing is a clear, but if he wants to make the thing survive, he can swing first. In the end, he just goes for the card draw, though. Not sure exactly what he was hoping to hit.
Yeah, Skipper doesn't get the job done quite yet. Krastenov, he has to like hit, and it doesn't even clear anything anyway.
He's just dead.
Yeah.
The silver. I don't know about that. I feel like it was between Deathwing with a swing first, or just Deathwing and give up initiative again. Oh wait, Purge isn't active?
Because of
the bombs, right?
Shuffle effect. The bombs deny it, of course.
I didn't. Okay, I gonna be honest, didn't know about that interaction either.
I mean, if I'd sat down and thought about it, probably could have figured it out as you just did actually, as I take the credit for it there. But yeah, obviously a bit of an unfortunate outcome. Which I mean, Flurry I think is quite obviously playing for there. We were criticizing his play, but in the end, with no Blessing of Kings in the deck available for Surrender.
Yeah,
it makes
and
sense.
now Flurry's found a window to play down this Deathwing. Granted, he is still very close to dying. He has initiative now. Surrender needs to pick up something big. Even Lightforged Crusader is shut off now as well.
I mean, something big would be drawing every bomb in his deck. Would be not a bad way to just get the lethal hit straight away.
At this point, you probably just play them as 4/2s. Or at least one. At least one. You can go Squirrels, Hero Power, Lightforged, and drop the blessing on something. But wait. Oh wait, he was just dead, right? The 5 attack. I didn't even...
Yeah.
Oh my god, what a game.
Yeah, a lot of back and forth, a lot of interactions for certain people to learn about how that deck might operate. But in the end, it was looking very, very close. But the real problem there was what's kind of been the bane of Paladin for a long time here, is the lack of strong card draw in the deck that also provides tempo. Hand of Adal goes some way to sort that out. Obviously, Libram of Wisdom, if you can draw that early on, can go some way as well. But in the end there, for Surrender, it was just not quite enough consistent damage or consistent pressure to get over the finish line.
certain people learning interactions, meaning caster A and caster B in particular.
Mhm.
But yeah, that really did not go the way I expected it to. Probably
Yeah.
looking at it again, if it's not just Control Warrior and particularly Bomb Warrior, if you can shut off both the Zealots and the Lightforged Crusader, that goes a long way there. But I think ultimately for Flurry, what won him the game is the timing of the Deathwing. I was advocating playing it just to remove a 4-5 and a 2-1, and obviously that would not have worked well for Flurry's game plan of reversing the clock on surrender. So now they're at 1 game apiece. The Warrior is out of the way. I feel like Flurry has a much better shot in the series overall.
He really does, and he also has a much better shot, I would have to say, in this particular game, with that starting hand being insane and absolutely disastrous for surrender.
I hate calling games this early, but we talked about it a while ago. This is a lot like the combo priest mirror.
Yeah.
Person who gets to stick a minion first can often buff it and then just take every single value trade going forward. The depth charge, however,
Pretty good.
changes so much.
Yeah, that's pretty insane. Being able to buy him the time to get through to Lightforged Zealot is a big, big deal.
Oh man, that changes everything.
Do you just play Shotbot just to get a 2-1 on board come your turn?
I think so. Flurry definitely wants to be able to have a target for Hand of a Doll here. And it's before the turn before Lightforged Zealot is available, so it doesn't actually have a natural way of clearing this 2-1 without a minion on board. I think that's absolutely right from Flurry.
Or he wouldn't have had a way had he not had the Dwarven Sharpshooter, which can shoot the 1-1 into the...
You can shoot your recruit into it.
Yeah, exactly. Based on last game, it would be reasonable to assume that I do think it works that way, but fear not.
That'd be pretty funny to watch. Next best thing, though, for Surrender is developing a minion that's outside of the range of just a Hand of a Doll plus trade. But bear in mind, Flurry is running Blessing of Kings, and even if that's not there, he also has the Libram for the cleanest value trade of his life.
Yeah, it's absolutely perfect. And now, even with the counterplay available for Surrender, which is pretty crucial in the Lightforged Zealot to even have a chance really of swinging back this board, it's just awkwardly shaped, and it still means that Flurry is in with a real good chance of locking this down.
One thing I learned from playing about a dozen of these mirrors today alone is that awkwardly shaped is not a big deal as long as you end the turn with initiative, right? If
That's
you
true.
have the 4-2 and they don't, no matter if you sunk a 3 extra damage or had like a lackluster charge of your True Silver, it just means that suddenly Surrender is threatening Blessing of Authority. He's threatening all the other buff spells, and even if Flurry is able to remove that minion, it likely means Flurry didn't develop anything of his own, and then Surrender just follows up with his Devout Pupil. I think Zealot is absolutely the play here.
I mean, I don't know what Surrender's really thinking through here, but I can see from the fact that the light is changing on his face that he's clearly flicking through some kind of tabs here. Don't know if he's just updating his fans like I'm about to dunk on this guy, but wow, in the end, he doesn't go for the Lightforged Zealot here.
Okay, this is somewhat equivalent if you go for it, like, he essentially put 3 minions on board, including the Reborn, right? If you go Light Zealot and remove their minion, it's like you have net +1 on them. This still looks like net +2 even, more minions, so he's giving himself the most chances to stick a target for the Blood Authority. So I can see the reasoning behind it, but I am pretty surprised.
So the downside of this play, obviously, is, or the scary part of it, is that they can stick a buff on this minion now, right? They can go for Coin Blessing of Authority, but even then, I think that Flurry only has one of those in his deck. He has the 2 Blessing of Kings, but even then, if he goes with Blessing of Kings, you can then clean it up with the Lightforged Zealot swing of the True Silver on the following turn. So even though it seems kind of crazy at first glance, for Surrender, it actually just works out really well for him here.
Yeah, makes sense. If the thing he was afraid of was Consecration, it's not even in Flurry's deck there. And you saw from Flurry that he took a very disgusting, painful trade of a 5-1 into a 1-1 rather than the Shotbot, because you really, really have to value giving your opponent the narrowest board possible. Because once they're able to stick 2 and kind of parcel out their threats, that makes everything infinitely more difficult to deal with. Picking up the Braggart though, not bad for Flurry.
I know that a lot of different things did transpire to help Surrender along the way, but can we just appreciate how the state of this game is based on what we were saying with the starting hands? Like, we were calling it over turn one in favor of Flurry, and yet somehow he has still managed to wrestle back a winning state here, Surrender has, I would say.
Michael's depth charge is the absolute nuts.
Core in Libram Paladin.
Oh, yes. However, Flurry has managed to put together a rather awkward board for Surrender to deal with. Obviously, the 11-6 is looking like the prime target, but if Surrender doesn't deal with the goody two-shoes, Flurry can almost guaranteed get a value trade and then regenerate the shield here. I'm looking at the Aldor Truthseeker and just trade away the 11-6 because that makes it so that if the two shields wants to trade first, it's not killing the fourth, and then you buff it and get the shield. So in retrospect, Flurry would more ideally actually buff it first and then not regenerate the shield.
Yeah, that's true. That is a little bit awkward, which I think is what Surrender has done a great job of really doing for Flurry here, just making everything that little bit awkward.
I wonder.
The alternative, of course, is just Devout Pupil hero power. The Devout Pupil also presents a very similar problem to what the Truthseeker could have done. And fitting in the hero power is, you know, a lot more relevant than it looks at first glance, but the fact that Surrender doesn't have a big buff card to immediately pay off with it for the next turn, I think this line works out just fine as well.
So I think if you accept you're not getting the spell burst effect, which I think is you're not really expecting to here, just going with this line makes a lot of sense. Get down that Libram of Wisdom again in order to start getting more of them back to your hand with Lady Liadrin next turn.
Absolutely right from Flurry. When I was first playing this, trying to make sure my two shields could actually get the second shield and not be a goody one shield, but it is far more important that Flurry deals with every threat on Surrender's side, and that just makes, you know, half the deck a bit dead if you don't have a minion to immediately pay off with it.
It's a tough turn, isn't it? Is it Lightforged Zealot here to just clean up as much as possible? Libram of Hope
so
is
gross.
awkward, I suppose, at least.
It definitely looks gross, no matter which way you slice it, but I'm looking at the Libram of Hope because at least your next turn can look very clean with 2 4-drops. You can make the argument that there's still 2 4-drops for the next turn, but Consecrate is not necessarily going to be good on the follow-up. Oh. Ooh. I haven't even been keeping track of what's in this Liadrin, but it's just, they're getting really fat on both sides.
Yeah, it's like 2 Hand of Adals and what, 3 or 4 Blessing of Wisdoms at this point, or Libram of Wisdom, sorry.
Well, for this turn, I want to see Flurry start off with First Day of School because there's a couple 1-drops that can make a huge difference here. Elven Archer, Stone Tusk Boar, Broom. Yeah. If you got the Broom and Argent Braggart and rush that, it's just, it makes life a lot easier for Flurry.
Let me think.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you can still go for First Day of School first, but the line I'm like considering that will most likely happen is you just trade in the 5/3, play another Libram there, and then sacrifice them in, play the Lady Liadrin, and get as many back as possible.
Didn't realize that there were so many already available to Flurry. So the fact that he can just take a super clean trade with these, I think, makes a lot of sense that he'll go for Liadrin here. Surrender is looking top deck of Libram of Justice to pull him back into this.
Yes, I guess that's the best chance he has. Even then he's facing down like a +4/+4 buff every turn, or +5/+5 even, for 0 mana.
This is just APM Paladin now. How many Librams can you fit? Whoa, he fit all of it. That's impressive.
Eat your heart
definitely
out,
would have
voracious
roped
reader.
out. Yeah. Yikes.
So, dead?
He has 2 taunts. So not immediately dead, but over the course of a couple more turns, definitely looking like he's dead.
I guess that can buy him the time to get the Libram of Justice as the best chance. Maybe Flurry goes that little bit too all in.
That's just a problem. Last time we saw Libram Paladin on a big stage was, I believe, at the last Masters Tour, and it had that very weird interaction where the person playing against it just went all face the second that they saw that the infinite train had been activated already of these zero-cost Librams of Wisdom. Surrender doesn't have the liberty of that, because despite having taunts, Flurry's still able to trade them off every single turn. And he's the first one to get the Libram of Justice.
It is a staggering amount of damage that is being sunk into the pupil here.
If I were Flurry there, I would have been going for just the nuttiest first day of school and looking for lethal. But this line just gets him there anyway. Probably a lot more consistently.
Broom do anything here if he generates that? Not really. No dragon to activate Cleric Scales. I think that's finally going to be a wrap.
Indeed. Surrender put up a pretty good fight there with the help of Depth Charge. How many times we're mentioning that card. It's not even new to this set, but it feels like it's part of this Column set to me.
The victory is yours.
Game 3 going to Flurry. 2-1 up now. The Battle of the Paladins to get a win at all is what it feels like at the moment. And with Flurry getting that one out of the way, and as you said, the Warrior, which you thought would also struggle, now he's left with only the Druid, I believe, as his final remaining archetype to get a win over the line and secure his spot to fight against Glory for that semi-final match later on today. But I will say that the Paladin, I feel like one of its better matchups, has to be against the Druid, right? If you're able to stick those big buffs early on, surely Druid struggles to deal with that.
I definitely agree, and this is one of the few matchups that has had a pretty decent sample size on ladder, and it does look to be around 58% favored for the Paladin. And that's mainly, we have that sample size because these two decks are just very, very straightforward to play, I think, and that means a lot of people have been trying them out. However, it does have to depend on Surrender getting that consistent curve, and most importantly, landing a buff on one of those minions before the Guardian Animals can come down, which could be a little bit more difficult if you're not running the Blessing of Kings.
Must be preserved.
That's absolutely right. And not only the Blessing of Kings, but also the Argent Braggarts, which are missing from Surrender's list, I believe. It's a very interesting build of the deck for sure. Less kind of like combo-oriented on sticking the Blessing of Kings and the Argent Braggarts, instead just kind of curving out. But before we get to that, it's going to be the Druid mirror first of all. And we already saw, Gia, the power of going for Speaker Ghidra into Overgrowth. Does that make it a keep in the matchup?
Oh, I've never kept this without anything to follow up before. The fact that we've seen it twice today, I feel like it's an omen. Maybe you do just keep it. Even just as a card on 3, the opposing Druid has very few ways to deal with it because of the 4 health stat line. If it had 1 less health, I would say, nah, you never keep this.
It's honestly tempting because my general philosophy is you never keep anything except Guardian Animals, and ways to get up to Guardian Animals as quick as possible is the general way you're approaching the matchup. But did Surrender just... Oh, I think it was a full toss.
Okay, yeah, I thought it was a full keep, and I would have been completely shocked because although it was a curve, it was a very lackluster curve, and this hand is looking way more like it.
That's why you mulligan it away. You get 2 in your head if you're thinking like, Ghidra into Overgrowth, that sounds good. Nope, Guardian Animals as soon as possible. That sounds good.
If he had the Overgrowth to begin with alongside Ghidra, I would absolutely advocate keeping it, but this hand, I think Flurry is going to struggle quite a bit keeping up with it. Worth mentioning the differences in the build, that Flurry does have 2 copies of Exotic Mount Seller, which has been in and out of these lists. It's coming at the cost of more beasts in the package, so the consistency of Guardian Animals is hurt for Flurry.
Right. However, while the consistency may have been hurt, in this particular instance, he's hit it. He's got the ramp, he's got Mount Seller, and a heck of a lot of cheap spells to go along with it.
You're right. I mean, go off as early as the turn after this one because he has Lightning Bloom and Coin. And oh my goodness! Wait a minute. Doesn't look legal. However, Surrender can also pop up with Chaos next turn.
Neither side is illegal. This is completely not allowed from either player.
Oh my gosh. Well, if you're Flurry, I'm popping off here. 100%.
How? There's like 3 different ways to pop off. They're all broken.
I want the Mount Seller pop off because he can still go Guardian Animals next turn and benefit from the rush of that, more likely.
So how many cards are you using there to do that? You're not using the Lightning Bloom. Okay. Yeah, that makes
I
sense.
supply only the finest creatures.
I wonder if there was a way he could use Lightning Bloom because he has Innervate next. No, wait, it doesn't work out. Never
It
mind.
doesn't quite work, yeah.
That's a new one in the pool.
Nice to spice things up along with the other broken beasts you can get.
The guy that has a 4/4 in it. The snake eating an elephant meme. That's what I'm choosing to call this card.
What?
You've never seen that? The silhouette that looks like, and then you're asked, does this look like a hat or does it look like a snake that ate an elephant? And then supposedly your entire creative capacity is based off what you see.
Oh, I mean, I only have a certain amount of RAM that I can fit all the memes into in my brain. When one goes in, one gets pushed out.
Well, this is looking like the Kael'thas turn for Surrender. He can get
Agreed.
quite a few activations because of nature studies.
Energy. Power.
It's a cheap spell.
People are addicted to it.
Oh, the
that's
Thresher.
pretty good. Oh.
He can deal with the Mount Seller.
So he needs to hit some kind of other cheap spell first, right? He needs to get Innovate or Bog Beam here in order to get another activation. Oh, which he hits with Lightning Bloom.
Oh my gosh. I was gonna say, it was looking a little bit greedy to me there to not send the Twilight Runner into the Mount Seller for the guaranteed clear, but Surrender takes a calculated risk and now he gets to stick the Twilight Runner, still remove the Mount Seller, and absolutely take control of this game.
Yeah, I mean, he was just going off there, just going things, gotta do things right now. And he clears the important part of the board.
Flurry, if he picks up a Thresher of his own,
Oh my god.
could have been big here. Not quite. He can't kill the kill. Wait,
He can?
You can
with Lightning Bloom
innervate
hero power?
so yucky.
It's
Everything's
very
so
yucky. I mean, Kael'thas you can just leave up at this point. I'd argue it's better
Yeah.
to kill off the Twilight Runner instead.
Agreed. Especially since his attack can make him pick up a way to deal with potentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely like that. 2 cards left in hand. If you're putting Surrender on being a god and having the overflow, then you kill the Kael'thas, but it doesn't feel particularly likely.
For no one.
Yeah.
Whereas if you leave up the Twilight Runner, you're guaranteed giving Surrender ways to draw.
Yeah, and even if there is overflow, he can't play it on this turn right because he's overloaded for 2 with the Lightning Bloom.
Alright. Well, potentially a disaster for Flurry there.
I can totally see where Flurry is coming from. It's so scary to leave Kael'thas up. It's just so ingrained in your mind that you have to kill it the turn it comes down. But I think you could have just taken a calculated risk there in going for killing the Twilight Runner and starving them of cards.
While I agree, it's also possible that Flurry was thinking if he trades into the Twilight Runner, he's left with a 5/5 versus 4/7, and then he still might not be able to kill it the turn after this one if
True.
Surrender had a way to remove his 5/5.
That's very possible.
But one thing's clear is kind of grasping at straws here, but Kael'thas can make miracles happen.
Power.
That is most certainly true.
Okay, 1 cheap, 2 cheap, 1 survival. Is it there? No payoff.
Yikes. So he can go, quote unquote, go again with like overgrowth, which would then let him get another activation.
I was looking at nature studies as the go again.
Oh, okay. Sure.
Wait, does it
That
fit?
doesn't work though.
Oh, it doesn't fit.
It doesn't work.
It's 1 on.
He would have had to have got a 0 or a 1 mana spell. And even then, that would mean he wouldn't have any payoff.
Ugh. I think you do just still end up taking the survival at this point, but it was so short of being fit for a little bit.
And in a heartbeat, it's turned around. Surrender. He gets the draw. He's left with likely, or guaranteed, in fact, the ability to clear off. He goes Lightning Bloom, then Speaker Gidra,
Yes.
then the Overflow, to be
Overflow.
very specific order.
He's been hovering over Gidra first. I'm about to get a heart attack, Tarek.
I mean, he could still just go for it in that order, right, and hope to hit a Bog Beam or something in order to leave himself with 1 extra mana at the end of it is the payoff. But
I want
yes.
+7/+7 on my Gidra.
I'm arguing the devil's advocate here for no reason. I completely agree with you here. This is the way to do it. I will take my +7/+7 buff. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I am not way out for Flurry anymore.
Just so clean.
Time waits for no one.
I guess it's a little bit short of being clean. It's still nutty, don't get me wrong. But ideally, Surrender would have wanted to just hit his Gidra once and Bog Beam, but he would have been 1
Yeah.
damage short to deal with the Chaos.
I mean, I think his game plan here is actually just protect Gidra. Leave it as a battering ram at 8 attack.
Okay.
And don't utilize the rush. I like this a lot.
I'm unsure because even if Gidra traded once, it would still be at 5 HP behind 3 taunts had he not traded the other beast. And I think
true.
it's unlikely to be dealt with. But I guess the double Bog Beam in particular is what Surrender escapes.
Yeah, double Bog Beam. There's also Bog Beam Crystal Power, which is something you have to be afraid of.
Sure.
And it's just game winning. If it does stick, the benefit is you win the game.
Absolutely. This could be the Soul of the Forest game if you want.
Yeah, I'm looking at Runic Carving's Rush. Does that allow him to just, like, again, use the Gidra to hit face twice as a battering ram? Kind of.
Sure.
Like if he goes for Rush on all 4 of them.
Yeah, just kill the Mount Seller.
Right, yeah.
Okay, I like that. 16 to the face always sounds good to me. But he could just heal the Gidra back up.
I'm fine with this as well.
I'm almost out of cards.
At first glance, this looks like it's giving Flurry one more turn
Yeah.
to potentially pull it back. But if we think about ways that Flurry could potentially pull back against an 8/8 with Wind Fury, there just aren't any.
I mean, it's come and gone. His opportunity to win the game was on the Kael'thas turn, and it didn't come together, right? Whether he miscounted how many spells he'd be able to do with the nature studies or whatever else went wrong along the way. Just didn't come together.
And in the end, this still does just set up 2-turn lethal for Surrender anyway. So every out was covered there, and we are going to Game 5.
Another Game 5 here after our grueling match between Chonsu and Glory in the upper bracket final. Now it finally comes down to this. It would be, I think it's fair to say, based on last series, a bit of an upset if Flurry is able to take the win over Surrender. Not to throw too much shade at Flurry, but Surrender is just often touted as the best for a reason. He was playing out of his mind in the finals up against Glory and was so nearly able to get over the finish line and be our representative going through to the World Championships. Wasn't quite able to get there, but is in with a great spot of doing so this time to get there 2 years in a row. And he just has to win with a game against Paladin versus Druid to put himself in great standing to get that Division A spot heading into the round robin.
All right, Dark. I'm going to come in hot with my first hot take of this
I
is,
must protect
I think that we've been putting Surrender on a pedestal. Of course, he's a great player. Of course, you and I and Raven in particular are huge fans. But as of this year, and even last, if we include that, there's a lot of names that I feel like are in very strong contention to be called best of APAC. Or even just based on Glory's most recent performance, I find it a struggle to keep saying that Surrender's the best, Surrender's the best. He is very,
Really?
very good, but I
Huh.
also want to make it known that every single player in Grandmasters in APAC has a good shot of winning, especially in this meta, no matter who they're faced up against. You put in the time and the effort, you can get so much of an edge when all of these decks are so fresh.
I mean, I think you raise a good point, because you always have to add the addendum when you're talking about best players in a region, best players in the world. It's razor thin, the margins that we're talking about between these top players. It's very, very small percentages they are getting over the top of each other. But for me, the moments of genius that come through have just, different players have had them, but it's been consistently Surrender right up on the top. He has been making very few mistakes with his gameplay last season and last year as well. If we want to look at holistically his run through Grandmasters and also through HCT, the previous esports system we had, it's got to go to Surrender. I'm all in on Chonsu this season. I think he's been putting in the work, and it's going to come through. But I mean, this is Surrender, man. He's the nuts.
Let me think.
Okay, I can definitely get behind if we look at track record. Hall of Famer, first candidate for APAC is Surrender, 100%. This season, I'm definitely gonna put two other names up there to watch out for, and possibly even higher on the pedestal. Though Chonsu, you mentioned one of them, and of course Glory, given his big performance from last season, and add up Alutamu as well. I'm just a big fan.
I mean, I want to put 50 names on there. I want to put Alan joining us this season. I want to put Possessi on there. I want to put Tom, because he's Tom. Like, the list would go on and on and on. But to decide it definitively not being results-oriented at all, we'll base it on the outcome of this game of Hearthstone, Gia. And with Surrender off to a pretty aggressive start here, he's looking to be in a good spot, given that Flurry has a powerful, I guess, but slow hand for sure.
Yeah, it was slow up until last turn. Now he has this Twilight Runner curve. Granted, it's still gonna take a top deck of either Lightning Bloom or Innervate to really get him to pop off.
Yeah.
But the Twilight Runner giving him additional draws, I think, has a decent chance of letting Flurry just run away with the Guardian Animals. So it's up to Surrender to really put together the biggest amount of threat that he can. The fact that he went for Hand of a Doll last turn as opposed to second Shotbot shows you that he's prioritizing getting more immediate damage as well. Light Forge Zealot is the curve play available for Surrender here. It's just painful that he can't swing into the stealth minion, but as long as he's putting more on board, I can definitely get on board.
Yeah, I think so. The only scary bit is, of course, that you're looking at potentially Libram of Justice on the following turn, which would kind of overwrite the weapon. But even then, you could just swing face twice, on this turn and next turn in order to get in the damage immediately. Just play your guys.
Yep. The other very scary thing for potentially the Guardian Animals being ramped up here, because Lake Thrasher could be a huge problem here.
So he's got to think this through carefully here, right? Because obviously you have to keep your eye on a KT turn here, with being able to draw an extra 0 or 1 mana spell, and go with Kael'thas and Guardian Animals, and potentially, if you're lucky, even a second activation, with the Survival of the Fittest as well.
So in that vein, Flurry can start with the attack of the Twilight Runner on the 2/2. It has that downside of you potentially drawing your Lake Thrasher, exactly, but I think the payoff of not running into that low odds scenario is super huge here.
Yeah, Surrender does not like what he sees here. Like you said, Lake Thrasher would be insane. Secure the deck. That's a cheap spell. We'll take that.
Oh, he misses on the Thresher.
Okay.
Bear in mind, Flurry's list is just 4 beasts, so this outcome was very unlikely to not hit Thresher on. And the fact that Surrender gets to stick a minion is pretty big, because now the constant and a bunch of trades can deal with the Kael'thas. Unless, of course, this Teacher's Pet spits out a taunt.
which is not a ridiculous thing to assume, but definitely unlikely. And I mean, I've just got to say, if you're not clearing off the Kael'thas this turn, are you really expecting to have a chance?
I guess it was just a small question of how he wanted to clear it up. There's also an option for Blessing of Authority and just True Silver into the 4-1 and then Value Trade into KT. However, the upside of Consecrate being able to deal with the Twilight Runner, I think, is just a little bit too much to warrant anything else.
Do we just secure the deck down and start attacking FaZe, kill him with claws?
That doesn't seem likely when Flurry himself is down to 9. Yes, he has this crystal power, but I would definitely prefer him looking for something more proactive.
Elimination is tempting, right? It's a little bit greedy, I suppose, given that you don't have any minions at the moment, so it's potentially looking a little bit too late game oriented. But with Survival of the Fittest able to buff something up, that could be huge.
Definitely looking at that as well. Especially since he can Ironbark first and then copy it.
True.
It's not a huge threat by any stretch of the imagination, but I think Flurry is not looking for huge threats here. He's looking for something to stick. And as he has Lightning Bloom, Survival.
Yeah, Starfall was definitely the other thing to consider here. Just as having extra removal options on this turn. The correct option, however, was of course Savage Roar and go secure the deck, Savage Roar, and just kill them over the next turn. I'll let it slide.
Well, Surrender able to get down that Truth Seeker. The Libram of Justice, nice and cheap, able to be comboed with that second Consecrate that he's drawn now. But he might be hesitant to pull the trigger on that big combo. I don't think it's necessary here at all.
Whoa, this is getting spicy now. Flurry has Survival of the Fittest in play. His game plan has been turned up to 11, but only if he can find the minions with the buff to play. And in that meantime, if he is missing out on those, this is the chance for Surrender to finally get ahead on board and stick some big threats. But how does he go about it?
I mean, the play that jumps out at me is the 2 last cards. Just clear the Zigzor, put down a 4/5. But I think there's room to get creative and possibly a bit greedy with this Blessing of Authority, because he can find a way to set up a faster lethal, perhaps. The problem is, the best thing he can buff is just a little guy, little recruit, but he can also fit the Libram of Wisdom, so it would go all the way up to a 10/10.
Wow.
I like this a lot. If the Zigzor is dealing with this, that's fine. You end up removing it anyway. And if it's not dealing with that, he can get so much more value out of this Libram of Justice.
Whoa! Oh my god, that top deck for Flurry is insane!
Doesn't leave him much mana to work with, though.
Who cares?
He doesn't pick... Okay, yeah, he picked up a way to deal with the 10/10. So that's the kicker.
Like, I'm looking if he can go for...
Go ahead.
Fit in. Yeah. Am I crazy here for wanting to go for like Hero Power plus Moonfire with the Ironbark to take it out and then heal it back up with the Crystal Power so that it's not left on a low health total?
That doesn't sound crazy to me. Thing is, I'm not sure the difference, how big of a difference 1 health and 6 health is in a world where Libram of Justice exists.
Yeah.
But you have the right idea for sure, I think, in that the Crystal Power does not need to go on Flurry's face by any means.
Yeah.
Because there's no burst for Surrender other than the True Silvers.
Surrender, I think here, if he was looking to save the Libram of Justice last turn, he is going to be looking to try and find any avenue that allows him to save it again this turn, given that he has to be expecting Ysera, Mount Zealots, more beasts potentially as well.
Lady Liadrin this turn looks a bit lackluster, but it's his best mana expenditure play, and at the very least it still challenges the Zigzor, especially since he can chuck a bunch of these with it immediately. Overall, I just like how patient he's being with that big combo. Justice Consecrate is his ace in the hole.
Move quickly.
So, I don't see much of a point in buffing this to 8 health. If he's going to buff the Adrian, I want to see both of the Librams land on it so that the Zixor by itself doesn't trade well. Or he could put both on the other minion, sure.
Yeah, I mean, just make it awkward. Just stick them on something here for the most part. And the taunt, I think, does make some amount of sense, right?
Well, Ysera is the big play. In fact, it's not
What,
even that ballsy because he can just remove the 6/7 anyway with the Moonfire, right?
True.
Creatures.
But the fact that this gets 3 activations, I forgot that Lightning Bloom was absolutely insane. Or even 4 if he wants to
Ooh.
go Overgrowth instead.
That does kind of change things. Now that he's got
Yeah.
a rush, he could go for Moonfire Starfall to clear off both minions here.
Yeah. That looks like a winning play to me. It's Moonfire, then Starfall for 5, and then he can trade off. His Mount Seller is likely to stick.
Time waits for no one.
Now, unless he gets exactly another Griffin, he's not going to be able to clear off both of these minions here.
And this entire time, I think Flurry, he knows that the Libram of Justice has been playing on his mind. And it's infinitely worse to have to deal with that if your opponent still sticks a minion after the clear turn.
I agree completely. It's kind of a disaster here for Flurry, to
Yeah.
be perfectly honest. Having the board cleared, very likely, which we can see it will, and all the damage that can come through with double, if not triple now, Libram of Justice.
It's huge. Flurry also used Lightning Bloom, so he's overloaded, can't play Ysera next turn. Surrender, he just needs to figure out a way to get down 2-turn lethal between the Consecrate, putting Flurry down to 17, and then just being able to put, 3 Librams on this Liadrin and the Hand of a Doll. I think it's well within range.
Let me think.
Just want to see all the buffs except Blessing of Authority land on this Liadrin. There's an argument, I suppose, for going Authority and then just value
Right.
trading the Mount Seller.
That's the one other line I'm looking at here. I think the fact that you miss out on so much damage to the face is why I don't like it, given that you've seen, I think, both of the Iron Barks at this point. You're very consistently setting up lethal here.
Yeah, the other play, I think it was close to setting up lethal as well, but it was dependent on the Liadrin sticking on board.
Yeah.
To be fair, it was pretty likely. But both of these lines spell doom for Flurry, and that is gonna be game. Oh my gosh, that second to the last turn could have changed everything.
Yeah, and I think, to be honest, it should have, because it's not like there were a few different outcomes that could have come off the Mount Seller that would have made it a lot more amenable there. You know, it's arguable that by digging for a Bog Beam, it was fairly likely that Flurry could have been able to get there, but the benefit you're only getting there is one extra beast. I think I would much rather get yourself the guaranteed clear on the board there, now that you've been given the opportunity to do so with the Griffin coming down, and then just make sure that there aren't all these buffs that can come down. Because it's not like, oh, I hope my opponent doesn't have any way to buff this minion. He had the double Libram of Justice in hand, or sorry, Libram of Wisdom, if nothing else, to be able to buff it up. And I think for Flurry, they're just not quite emphasizing how important it is to keep the Paladin board clear when possible.
Definitely a very interesting game there. And you know what? Having seen the Paladin, I think it's fair to say outplay Druid there. And previously, that Demon Hunter from Chonsu outplaying Surrender's own Paladin. Maybe
Yeah.
I should rescind my previous statement of this deck is very easy to play or even play against. It definitely has differences with Combo Priest towards the end, which is
Yes.
that you don't just win by removing every single turn. Because at that point, they have probably popped off with their 0-cost Libram of Wisdom, and they can infinitely generate more value. So it's kind of a delicate balance. You have to toe the line between making sure that they don't have threats to stick Blessing of Authority on every turn, but also that you're killing them on time. And Flurry, I think, was definitely looking at making sure that Surrender would be dead in the next couple turns by going for an extra minion from Mount Seller instead, but maybe failed to recognize that removal was still the game plan that he had to be going for at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I like the way you phrase it of like, it speeds up in the late game. Paladin is kind of like an engine at this point that slowly starts to rev up and get these powerful, cheap buffs rolling. But it's kind of like an engine with a boxing glove strapped to it that can also just punch you in the face at any point and kill you before it even speeds up. But with that out of the way, and a very crude analogy to end things up on, it does mean that Surrender is going to be going through to our next elimination match, or qualifying match, I should say, through to the semi-final on Sunday. He is going to be playing up against Glory after his narrow loss to Chonsu in the winners bracket match. And we got a rematch here, Gia, our finals that we had for the end of last season.
Oh, yeah.
What a great way to start things off on the first day of Season 2. Flurry versus Glory. This is going to be a cracker of a match coming up right after this break.